To continue our review of tissues, let's examine tissues in vertebrates. One word of warning. There will be a lot of content in this video. You need to know this content for lab. I hope that the video helps. You might have to do some stop, replay, and take some notes. Let's start with epithelial tissue. We'll look at several types, but there are some traits that they all have in common. Epithelial tissue occurs in sheets of cells, membranes, and because the sheets are thin, there are no blood vessels. Epithelial tissue is often found as a covering. It is the outer layer of your body, your skin, and it also lines your organs. It functions in protection, absorption, diffusion, and secretion. The different types of epithelial tissues can be classified by the shapes of the cells and by how many layers of cells there are. If there is one layer of cells, the tissue is said to be simple. Multiple layers of cells are called stratified. The three cell shapes used to classify epithelium are these. Squamous epithelium has flat cells, cuboidal epithelium cells are square, and columnar epithelium cells or tissues are made of tall columns. Now we will look at some of the types of epithelium and see how size and shape work together. Simple squamous epithelium, as you now know, is a single layer or sheet of flat cells. Because it forms such a flat layer, it's great for the passive diffusion of gases and water. Where would you find such a tissue in the body? Well, it forms the lining of your mouth and the alveoli of your lungs, for example. It also lines your blood vessels, your capillaries. Simple columnar epithelium is a single layer of tall cells. This tissue has goblet cells that secrete mucus. Because of the mucus and the height of the cells, it's good for protection. You can find columnar epithelium in the lining of the stomach and intestines, parts of the respiratory tract, and the uterus, among other places. Some simple columnar epithelium will have small hairs called villi or microvilli. These move particles along like dust in your respiratory tract. It's another example of protection. Stratified squamous. Now we have a deep layer of squamous cells. These cells are constantly being replaced and are found wherever your body gets abrasion. It's your skin, for example, and the lining of your esophagus. Now, lots of seemingly unrelated tissues are classified as connective tissues. Think of how different are bones, fat, and blood. But they all share some characteristics that make them similar. Number one of these is that there are relatively few cells surrounded by a matrix of extracellular material. This material is called the matrix, and it consists of protein fibers and a fluid material called the ground substance, as we'll see in a minute. Connective tissue is the most abundant tissue in your body, and it has a lot of different functions, as we will review in just a moment. The first tissues we'll look at are considered connective tissue proper. These are the tissues for which connective tissue was named. First, look at loose connective tissue. As the name implies, it has a really open or loose extracellular matrix of elastic fibers and collagen fibers. Collagen fibers are a mesh for support, and elastin or elastic fibers, as the name implies, make the tissue elastic or stretchy. The fibroblasts, these are the cells that secrete the matrix. And this tissue binds and supports. It's found under your skin, between the skin and the muscle, and between your organs. It's what holds you together. Adipose tissue is, fat. It serves for energy storage and insulation. It's found throughout the body, but mostly under the skin, around the kidneys, in the bone marrow, and in the breasts. It doesn't have a lot of extracellular matrix, which makes it unusual, and under the microscope looks like a lot of bubbles. Adipose tissue stores fat in the body that can be then later used as an energy source. Dense connective tissue has less ground substance and is more tightly packed than loose connective tissue. It is stronger than loose connective tissue. The purpose of dense connective tissue in the body is to connect muscles, ligaments, and bones together. You can see the layers of cells in this image. That's what gives dense connective tissue its strength. Now we move on to special connective tissues. In cartilage, the collagen fibers are laid down in long parallel arrays. This makes cartilage really strong, and it is flexible but not so stretchy. It is a cushion. It is found on the joint surfaces, but also in the tip of your nose, the tips of your ears, and in the intervertebral discs of your spine. The chondrocytes, these are the cells of cartilage. They live in small spaces called lacunae. You'll see the term lacunae again. Singular is lacuna, plural is lacunae. Anytime you see that term, just think of a small open space. Blood. Blood is a connective tissue because the cells are surrounded or suspended in an extracellular matrix, which is your plasma. The function of blood is the transportation, mostly of oxygen. Red blood cells, you have probably heard them called erythrocytes. They have no nucleus because they carry the oxygen. They need that space in there for carrying the oxygen. White blood cells are called leukocytes, and there are 6 types. You can read about them on your own. Their primary function is to fight disease and the invasion of foreign bodies and substances in the human body. Now, who would have thought that bone was a connective tissue? Well, bone cells, the osteocytes, are contained in a crystalline matrix, that is, the bone. There are some interesting characteristics of bone that you need to know. The osteocytes live in spaces called lacunae. We just heard that term. Haversian canals are the canals for blood vessels and nerves through the bone. Lamellae is the term for concentric rings, like rings in a tree. These help give the bone its strength. And canaliculi, that's a fancy word for small canals. The canaliculi are small transverse canals, meaning sideways canals, that connect the osteocytes. They allow the exchange of cytoplasm, another material, through the bone from one osteocyte to another. The function of bone, that's just locomotion and protection of your organs. Now let's move on to muscle tissue. There are 3 types of muscle tissue, and all have fibers with the ability to contract. The functions of muscle are movement, posture, and to produce heat. As you know, muscle tissue is found throughout your body. Smooth muscle is involuntary. You don't have to tell it what to do. It makes rhythmic contractions, like in your digestive tract, to move food along. Notice that there are no striations in this smooth muscle, and that there is only 1 nucleus per cell. Other places you find smooth muscle are in your blood vessels, in your capillaries, helping move blood through the extremities of your blood vessels, and in the iris of your eye. The iris controls the light that goes in and out of your eye, like shining a flashlight on your eye or a cat's eye. You can see that iris contract. And you didn't have to tell it to do that. Pretty good, huh? Skeletal muscle tissue is voluntary. It is under your conscious control to contract. Right, it moves your bones when you tell it to. You can see the striations, and there are multiple nuclei per each cell, and the nuclei are found on the periphery of the cells. Cardiac muscle is involuntary. Good thing for that. And it is responsible for the rhythmic contractions of your heart. These cells are striated, but have only 1 nucleus per cell. Take notice of the intercalated discs. I'll point at them. These gap junctions link adjacent cells, and they permit the movement of ions between the cells. By doing so, they synchronize the contractions of the cells and ultimately of the heart. Last but not least, nervous tissue. Here we have two cell types. Neurons transmit electrochemical impulses through the body, and glial cells secrete substances that support and protect the neurons. Nervous tissue is found in the central nervous system, meaning the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, all the nerves that go from the spinal cord down to your fingertips and your toes and everywhere else. The function is to transmit all of the electrical impulses that make work happen in your body and keep your body alive. In these two images, you can see some neurons suspended in the matrix. Axons are extensions of the cytoplasm of the neuron that transmit signals away from the cell. Dendrites are the opposite. They are extensions that bring impulses back to the neuron. This finishes our brief overview of tissues in the human body. There is lots more information to know about tissues, but they're not all that central to the lab, and you'll get that information in lecture and in your textbook. Thanks a lot.